Good afternoon and welcome everybody. I can't believe we're at the end of week 5 already. This course seems just to fly in whenever it's run. I'm on my own this afternoon because Annie unfortunately is unwell, so don't ask me any hard questions, just be kind to me. It's been an interesting week, lots and lots of different contributions on the discussion boards, and it's lovely to see people interacting with one another in those discussions and kind of almost building a community of practice, a community of knowledge. It's I guess the subject matter this week about looking at what are the professional responses has provoked a lot of thought and a lot of discussion online. And people, I think there's been some really interesting things where people have been looking at different countries and looking at what's available there. And I guess for us in Scotland, that has sometimes meant that we have taken some heart from the fact that we do have at least a policy in place. And a policy, I guess, that is being, as we saw in the programme for government in Scotland this week, that not this week, last week, it's very, very much the equally safe agenda, is very much in the programme for government. So we're in a good place, I think. That doesn't mean to say we're in the best place or that it couldn't be better, but things are going, I think, in the right direction. Some of the debate and discussion that began in week 3 is still ongoing, and there's been some very forthright expressions of opinion in there. Sometimes I guess that's in the difficulty in the written word, and putting your comments online and in limited fashion means that sometimes we don't get the nuance, we don't get the facial expressions, and sometimes the way in which things are worded can cause offence, distress, and there's been some quite strong language at times in that. And my guess is that if we were sitting in a room around a table, the language might be even stronger, but the capacity for us to actually interact with one another in a more direct way may have had other outcomes. But we had some comments about the health warning and about the nature of the health warning this week, about whether or not that was a mechanism that we as educators use just to kind of protect ourselves. But I guess I just wanted to respond to that and say that very clearly, through many, many years of working with a range of professionals in this area, but more importantly, a range of victims of abuse, that health warning was very sincerely meant. It's not there as a please don't sue us because we warned you that this would be difficult. It's there genuinely as a take care of yourselves and try and be respectful of one another in this domain. There are times when people, and I guess this is one of the problems with electronic communications, oftentimes people will say things in an electronic forum that they wouldn't say face to face. So we have to kind of think about how we use that and what the nuance is and the language that we use. But it's a free and open debate, and we learn different things every week from the different perspectives that are put forward. I suppose one of the things I was interested in was that debate in week 3 is still ongoing. People are still making comments in that, but some of the people from week 3 appear to have disappeared in weeks 4 and 5. And I would hope that people haven't been put off by the kind of the strength or the force of the discussion, and will feel safe enough and able enough to come back in with their own points of view. Okay, we'll have a wee look at some of the questions that have been put on, and they're interesting questions, and I had to go and do a wee bit of homework to see if I could come up with clear enough answers. Eddie, you offered us a question about the Safe and Together project. I guess we will say the Safe and Together model. And the trauma-based responses is indeed part of the Safe and Together model. Whether or not there's any, my understanding thus far is that there is no national adoption of Safe and Together, but individual local authorities across the country have adopted it, some more in more wholesale fashion than others. Edinburgh, for example, have I think they're now on their third round of training champions, Safe and Together champions, who then cascade the principles and ideas down into practice teams. You mentioned the Lanarkshires, and it seemed that although the lecture that we had on the site for this week comes from Lanarkshire, there didn't seem to be a wholesale adoption. And I don't think there is, but the good practice guidance on domestic abuse and the protection of children that was issued from South Lanarkshire certainly draws very heavily on the Safe and Together model. It was published in 2016, October 2016, and it's due to be reviewed this month. So it may well be that there is some consultation out there about how effective it has been thus far and whether or not it should be rolled out further. But certainly, as far as we're aware, there's no national plan for adopting the model. And I guess I was having some discussion with colleagues about this, that there are a range of models. Safe and Together is but one, and it's one that chimes with some of the views that I have about domestic abuse and some of the research that there's been done in relation to social work responses to domestic abuse situations. And whilst we've moved, certainly I think quite significantly, we've moved from further blaming of mothers for not protecting their children in violent households. I think we've still got a ways to go, but there are different models of doing that. Safer Lives is another model, and it may well be that some councils have had exposure to or sent staff on particular training. So the Scottish Government don't have one model for rollout as far as I'm aware at present time. So I hope that helps a bit. The next question that was posted online comes from Juliet. Thanks very much, Juliet. You've asked about the best and most accessible resources available to use as a way to introduce a sceptical organisation leader to the idea that they should become involved in developing a trauma-informed workplace, and to be aware of how they might best support someone within their organisation suffering from domestic abuse. I'm very aware that in the last few weeks I've seen some of the work of Children First, a national organisation, and its CEO, a woman called Mary Glasgow, who, on becoming CEO, took what I think she describes as a trauma-informed perspective to the organisation, first of all, prior to looking at the way in which the staff there responded and delivered services. So I would recommend that you Google Mary, and you'll see some of her work and some of the principles that are underpinning the approach that Children First are taking. And they very much kind of, it's almost like putting your own house in order before you go out to offer services. So I think there is a model there that is very useful. The other elements that I think are important in relation to this is the toolkit that we've developed as part of a project funded by the Scottish Government under the Equally Safe in Higher Education agenda. So over the last 2 years, myself and some colleagues have been working on developing a toolkit that can be used. Right now it's used in universities, and it's been rolled out in universities in Scotland. Not all universities, but we have a number of partners that are involved in the rollout of this model. And interestingly, at the launch of the model, when one of the ministers came along and participated in the launch, I had some people there from Marks and Spencer's. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, commercially sensitive way, but they did the catering for us that day, and the staff who were there facilitating the catering arrangements were saying, this is really interesting, and you know, they felt that Marks and Spencer's, as an example of a big organisation, could be interested in the way in which the toolkit could be used in their organisation. So in Strathclyde University, it's been adopted from the principal to the ground force. So we have all layers of staff in the university, and all students, undergraduates, postgraduates, postdoctoral students, everybody is included in the Equally Safe partnership. So that's another model. The resources for that are available via the Equally Safe website. And I'll put the details of the resources that I talk about this afternoon on the website in response to your questions. If not today, then early next week. So thanks for that, Juliet, and I hope that goes some way to responding to your query. The next question that I've got is from PJW and asks what steps have other countries taken to either open men's minds and hearts or impose significant and lifelong consequences for GBV perpetrators to deter attacks by boys and men. Now, some of that information, one of the challenges this week was to look at, to choose a part of the world and look and see what you could find out. So I think there is some information available in the discussion rooms. I had some thoughts in relation to what particularly has happened in Scotland and the UK. And one of the sites that I think might be quite useful for you to have a look at is the site that is run by the White Ribbon Campaign, which has champions of men helping other men to recognise and to address and to call out situations of abuse and gender-based discrimination when it's witnessed. So there's some excellent resources in that site. And I think it now has, I think there are probably white ribbon groups throughout the world. There you'll see perhaps come to prominence over 16 days in November, which is the kind of the days during which issues around domestic abuse and gender-based violence are highlighted throughout the world. So the White Ribbon Campaign comes from there, but the website has got a whole load of resources that you could perhaps explore to see what steps have been taken. Now, I think in your question, you might also have made some reference to the current situation in the United States in relation to the Supreme Court nominee, who is currently facing allegations of sexual assault in his youth. And the comments seem to indicate that there was absolutely no challenge to that in America. And actually, I suppose I was reflecting on this. There is a national resource centre on domestic violence, which again has got some really excellent resources. And they're currently working up a whole series of events for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is in October in the States. So I think it's well worth visiting and having a look at some of those resources and thinking about how applicable these are. One of the things that I was thinking about in relation to this is that these kinds of initiatives oftentimes don't make the front pages. You know, the timing of when we began to develop this course coincided with the allegations that have been made against people like Harvey Weinstein and others. And those are the kinds of the stories that make the headlines. The stories of campaigns that are actually changing hearts and minds don't always make the headlines. And I guess we have to think about that. You know, that there's lots of excellent initiatives that are doing great work, supporting and empowering people, but these aren't the things that make the headlines. And some of the stuff that we reflected on in week 2 or week 3 in relation to the power of the media and the force of the media in relation to how it presents issues about gender-based violence. Something for us to think about in how and what the media focus on and why it focuses in that way. So if we move to the next question comes from Robin. Thanks very much, Robin, for joining in. You've asked a really interesting question about self-defence classes and whether or not they actually help women to protect themselves against violence, and how early should self-defence be taught, and should it be free or subsidised to encourage more attendance. I guess my reflections on that are that we have to be careful not to shift responsibility for violence onto victims of violence and equip victims of violence with ways of deflecting that, because you might do the most sophisticated self-defence course in the world and you might have been trained in self-defence for a long time and still become the victim of violence. So I don't think it's a single solution problem. There's the evidence is quite equivocal. There's evidence to suggest that embedding self-defence as part of a kind of healthy lives kind of approach to relationships. Big analysis in Australia and New Zealand that looked at the experience of both primary and secondary school children. And they suggested that it's better delivered as part of a broader healthy relationships programme and more effective to do it in that way, in an integrated way, rather than as a one-off event. Just as I say, it's important for us not to think about things, not to think about this as a single solution. And that certainly was a big part of the debate in week 3 that's still ongoing. People were advocating that if women knew how to defend themselves more effectively, that would, I don't know that anybody was saying it would eradicate violence, but it might help people feel better and more equipped to deal with it. I guess I have a bit of a concern about that, because I worry that sometimes people who've done self-defence classes, if they do happen to become a victim of a violent assault, might then blame themselves. I should have been able to deal with that. I've done self-defence. I guess what I would say is that there are many people who have been martial artists, self-defence pioneer, all sorts of things, who have been the victims of violent assault, and all their self-defence training didn't actually help them in those circumstances. The other benefits, though, the benefits in terms of people feeling perhaps benefits to self-esteem, benefits to feeling a bit more in control, perhaps raised awareness, those kinds of things. So it's certainly, the research seems to indicate kind of mixed responses. I have to say I remain of the view that the best way of tackling violence against women and girls is to educate perpetrators and to hold perpetrators responsible for their behaviours. Some excellent work in Glasgow going on in relation to violence reduction, and from the historic picture of Glasgow as no mean city, where knife crime and gang violence was certainly at a peak in the 50s, and the reputation that Glasgow had as kind of a really violent city has certainly changed radically over the last 20 years. And I was listening to one of the people who participates in that programme on radio this week, and he was talking about the economic cost of his violence to the health service, and how many hospital admissions that he'd had in terms of the benefits system. And this project has helped him to look at the cost that violence has had to him, to his family, to wider society, and has helped him actually to retrain his way of thinking about the potential responses. He talked about his first response to most situations that he didn't like or was unhappy with was a violent response, an aggressive response, whereas now he has a more kind of philosophical response to stimulus that might formerly have provoked a violent reaction for him. So there are, I think, different ways of dealing with the violence that's presented to us, and self-defence classes might help some people, feel empowered, might help some people feel stronger and safer, but I don't think it's a single solution. So it's one of a range of approaches that we might take. I think that's all of the questions, unless there are any new ones coming in, David. So we've got some new ones. Okay. This will be my technical expertise and not being able to see where they are, so maybe I'm scrolling in the wrong direction. I don't have them here. No, forgive me while I find them. No, I can't see them. A wee bit of a technical hitch. I'm just going to show my technical support person here what I can see on my screen. So Who asked that question? Right, okay. There's a question here about personality types and whether or not we can we could suggest that certain personality types would be more prone to violent behaviour. And I guess that takes us way back to the whole nature-nurture debate. You know, what's a personality characteristic? Are some of us inherently more gentle and more aggressive than others? But whether we are or we are not, the way in which we respond to given situations, the way in which we respond to a stimulus or a provocation might be partly down to our personality, but it's also down to the ways in which we've learned to respond to difficulties or challenges in our lives. And if we're rewarded for aggressive behaviour, then that might help us, that might encourage us to think that aggressive behaviour is a way to deal with a situation. Or if we've witnessed that in our childhoods, we've witnessed that response, that may be the way in which we've learned about relationships. So some of that learning that happens in early childhood and socialisation that we're subject to undoubtedly influences the way in which we respond as adults. But we do have choices then too, you know, and those learned behaviours can also be unlearned and replaced by more what one might describe as more socially acceptable behaviours, certainly behaviours that encourage more healthy relationships. So again, not a straightforward, yes, these personality types are likely to be abusive and these are not, but I'm not neither psychologist nor psychiatrist, so we need to look for some more information from those kinds of disciplines. But ultimately, as I say, I think as human beings, we have choices about the way we behave to one another, and we have, as adults, capacity to make choices, good choices or less good choices in the way in which we conduct ourselves in personal relationships. So David will tell me the next question that's coming up. That's it? Okay. That's the last one. Sorry about the wee bit of technical difficulty there. I'm not quite sure whether it's my computer or whatever else, but I really appreciate people coming in, participating this afternoon, tuning in to the Hangout. And we hope you enjoy the final week of the course. Experience people doing the course and maybe doing 2, 3, 4 weeks of it and then being overtaken by other events and coming back in at a later stage. So some of you might be repeat attenders because you've missed bits of it, but we look forward to hearing your comments and your participation in the debate and discussion in the final week of the course. And it sometimes seems a wee bit odd to say we hope you enjoy the rest of it, but I do hope that you enjoy it and that you can see that there are positive things happening in this field, and hopefully in the last week you'll see some evidence of those and take heart from the fact that we're not standing still. This is a I was going to say a lifelong process. It's a generations long process, but we're certainly on the journey, and that's the most important thing. We're not standing still. So thanks very much for participating this afternoon, and goodbye from Glasgow. Bye.